so when you think about classroom management, it's easy to look at it as, oh, kids are acting up. But when you look at it in this perspective of, wait a minute, how do I help kids increase the assets that they have so that they can be more, have more agency over the environment we create? And so I really use a lot of that. And so I would create mentor programs and all these different things. And it's never perfect, but then I would say, okay, as it related to classroom management, I literally, my foundation was the kids created our quote unquote rules every year, and they were not called rules, we called them norms. And it's like, how should we interact with each other in our community?
What are some, in today's terms, what are some engagement pieces that you think teachers can use to create that engagement piece? We talked about with the kids, but also with the parents.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is I think from what I learned is that parents of all kinds, they want transparency, and they want to limit surprises, right? So I think a lot of times teachers need to really see parents as partners in the process, and you know, forward thinking in terms of what to expect for the year, what to expect in terms of a semester, homework, expectations at home and school, and make sure that bridge is aligned. And I think a lot of ways it's doing that assessment early and often up front, and you get a lot of that dividend paid throughout the school year when things actually come up. But you know, we also now have more opportunity through technology to communicate and stay connected with parents. And to me, I think that can be both good and bad, but it's also a good way to get ahead of a lot of issues. And my wife was the parent portal queen, you know, when my kids were in school, and she always knew what was happening, and that was very helpful for us in mitigating risk and challenges with the teachers.
Influence. Who are some other teachers that you would recommend studying? Like, I think everybody knows freedom writers, but who someone that influenced you? Some people that influenced you personally, maybe.
Oh man, there's so much stuff I read, and I honestly don't remember a lot of it. But it got, because there's so many different approaches and pedagogies, and you pick from so many different things. And I know Ruby Payne had some controversy over the years, but I think at the core it was understanding the communities in which you serve. That's huge. But for me, you know, the teachers who influenced me and were sort of my heroes were the teachers that I specifically had as kids when I was a kid, and then also the teachers that I just worked with. I stole something from so many. I'll give you two examples. One teacher, his name was Dr. Robert Berry. I can say that now because he was head of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. He was esteemed professor at UVA, the esteemed professor now at University of Arizona. And we started teaching next to each other, right? It's, you know, it's just amazing to see. But he taught, and he was just the best math teacher I've ever seen. And what I learned from him was, talk about classroom management. Classroom management is a non-issue. When you love something and you impart that love of that learning to the kids, then every time I would go, I had all these systems and cool things going on. And his approach was, let's get down to some cool math. And I would walk past this classroom, and it was just always, kids were locked in. So I learned that by being engaged in a real meaningful way through education, kids, you know, you limit their opportunities for behavior. And then the other one was a teacher of mine, Miss Shelley Meckler, back in the day, and I talked about her always during Teacher Appreciation Week. But again, 8th grade teacher, actually two teachers, Miss Meckler and my 1st grade teacher, Miss Williams, which I still remember, and I'm 53 years old. But the point is, when Miss Williams clearly now looped from being my kindergarten teacher to my 1st grade teacher, didn't know what that meant then, but I asked her first day of 1st grade, I was like, why are you my teacher again? And she said, well, I wanted to be your teacher again because you're one of my favorite students. It's not why she was my teacher, but guess who still remembers that 53 years later, right? And similarly, Miss Meckler was also a teacher who made me feel as if I was the only kid in the class. And I think those are the things that matter most to me, is that, you know, really making every kid feel like they are the most important kid in class. I don't care how many you have. And it's challenging, but giving that attention to kids and understanding their uniqueness, oh man, biggest gift you can do as a teacher.
Yeah. And we have that phrase we say a lot, student centered. Keep it
That's right.
student centered, and that's the I think that's the big goal. So so obviously we're both in the private sector now. Anyone that's watched my show for any length of time knows I went from the brick and mortar setting to the online setting. You have as well. And so just real quick, obviously it's a farce to say everything across America education wise is failing because there's teachers, schools, and superintendents that work very hard. So,
That's right.
what are in your experience? What are some things that you have seen done very well, and what do you think is a gap that the education system just across the nation can work to
Yeah.
close?
Yeah. Um, I mean, what I've seen well is schools that think out of the box and are innovative, and not only schools but school districts. I think back to I worked in started teaching in Newport News, Virginia, and this is really unique. 30 years later, looking back at this, but you know, the school I worked in was called an Achievable Dream Academy. It's a renowned program. It's not a charter school. It was a business person in the community, Mr. Walter Siegeloff, may he rest in peace, went to the superintendent and says, "Hey, look, I want to help struggling students in Newport News, Virginia, in tough neighborhoods." And they basically partnered and they created this charter school-like school within the school district. And they got all these great resources from the district. He tapped into his business community, got all these great resources. He got all these great educators who I remember having to apply. Why do you want to work here? Why do you want to work with this population? And so it was very intentional about creating that. And that innovation came from, it wasn't outside, it was a partnership between, because that couldn't have worked. He could have done it as a separate charter school, but it had more impact because he worked with an innovative school superintendent who said, yes, let's do this. I think the more schools and districts think out of the box like that, I think there's just amazing things that we can do. And then I think, in terms of ways that we can continue, things that are still struggling in education. Again, I think it goes back to, I'll go back to the teacher professional development as an example. If we're innovating the way we teach and the way schools operate, then we need to include teachers in that process. I heard a teacher say recently that teaching is the only profession in which, the people who go to school to get trained to do the job aren't included in decision makings. And if you think about that, that's actually pretty powerful. And I think the idea of, with teachers leaving and the teacher shortage that we're experiencing, teachers should have a say in a lot of things, and particularly what they need in their own professional learning to get better. And that's why I think things like the Stride Professional Development Center and other organizations and programs like that help them with that. So obviously a lot of things we can improve, but definitely I think professional development is an area of innovation we need.
I want to turn our attention, since you brought it up, the teacher shortage across the nation.
Yeah.
In Texas, post-COVID specifically, we experienced a mass exodus of teachers. We have in Texas, it's the independent school district world. There's the private school world, the charter school world. I've now been across. I've been across the gambit quite a bit. I've been in private school. I've been in charter schools. I've been in public schools. I think there's of course there's always room for improvement, but a lot of teachers in Texas left the profession altogether, even principals.
Yeah.
It's
tough.
So what do you think? Well, you said lack of professional development.
Yeah.
What beyond that? I want to peel that onion back a little bit.
No, it's a scary time. I mean, obviously you had educators who are just exiting out, right? They're at the end of their career and that's a natural transition. But then you have, a newer generation who's not in a single profession, who are in multiple professions at a greater rate than any time in history. So they're bouncing around, and maybe they say, I'm giving this a few years as opposed to, a lifelong career. So that's impacting it. But also it's the growing demands that are being placed on educators, right? I mean, it's, I've heard all the researchers teaching to the feeling of having to teach to the test. It's the increasing demands. It's the inability to do anything outside of the testing, and it's that they think will help enhance kids' learning, et cetera. Not having a voice. in the say. It's a whole lot, and obviously the pay, which is a huge one, right? That continues to be a challenge, and um, you put all those things together, you have a perfect storm of folks just leading, and then of course, COVID, as you mentioned, did not help because, I mean, even at Stride, we were more productive in our initial internal study post COVID, right? We got virtual and realized, hey, this can actually work. Well, now teachers are looking at, well, how can I be more productive? Maybe I don't want to sit, and that kind of thing. So a lot of schools, when they came back, I think schools were not ready for that change. And I think a lot of schools, school districts are trying to get ahead of it. They're creating their own offices of online education. They're creating diverse approaches to learning, giving teachers days off. That those kind of things will help. But any policies around increasing teacher pay, though, I think that's at the center of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you compare the national teacher pay to other nations of the world, and I don't make that comparison lightly,
Sure.
you can very easily see it's pretty disproportionately low. So
Yeah. Yeah. And our teachers just do a heck of a job. And as we know, how much money did you spend on your own as a teacher, right? You didn't wait for permission. Whatever little bit you had, and our teachers are doing this every day. And oftentimes it goes unnoticed, and it's impacting them at some point.
mhm. Yeah, so we've highlighted some of the changes that you experienced throughout your
Mhm.
career as a teacher, a principal, and now moving into an educational company.
Mhm.
We talked about society changes and the world we face now, and the difficulties facing some educators. So through all that, I don't know that education's been necessarily easier at any given time throughout history.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think maybe it's a different challenge. So throughout the
Mhm.
challenges that you face, throughout
Yeah.
the COVIDs, throughout the rise of even having to worry about school safety,
Mhm.
what kept you going?
Yeah. Man, again, I think no matter all the different roles that I've had, the compass has always been what I did in that class, in the classroom, and ultimately, um, I always give this story. It's a personal one, but I'm the one with the advanced degrees, and I was always thought I was a pretty smart kid in school from elementary on, but didn't always perform like I should. But I was able to make it through, and but my brother though is a great example who, was just not by my standards. He was genius. Like his test scores all throughout school, and he's the one who ended up getting the GED. And that's not a sad story. Like he's doing well, he's doing great. But I think schools fail. Schools often fail those kids who are like, man. He was taking apart computers in elementary. Like he was just bright, and brilliant, and reading no pictures, as we know in elementary school, like this big of fiction. And I'm just like how do we adjust to make sure we can meet that kid's needs? If we don't, we're going to lose them. And especially now you add technology. So I just think we have to continue to think about not standing and delivering, not only from a teacher perspective, but just from a school district pedagogical perspective, and really embrace the technology that we have and figure out how do we help kids understand and unpack that knowledge and recreate that knowledge and create a new knowledge. And that's the challenge ahead. But for me, what kept me going, it doesn't change. It's just that it's the student. How do we help them reach their potential? It's nothing has changed. And that's the most exciting part about it all. We've done that when there was pre-technology, face-to-face, online. And I think the more we figure it out, the better it will be.
At your stage of the game now, you're talking to a first year teacher. Go in any type of setting across the board.
Yep.
What's some things you would like to share with them?
Man, oh man. I would tell them to steal as much as they can. um, I would also tell them to, there's this thing on, performance expectation and learning expectation, or I should say performance orientation and learning orientation. As a new teacher, we want to be in performance orientation. We want to show that we got it together. And there's a part to that we always have, but the learning orientation doesn't change, right? Let your guards down, put your ego aside, and because you can't get that time back. But as a teacher, I remember teaching the same lesson, for example, in middle school at the beginning of the day. It got so much better by the end of the day. And you're thinking like, oh, how do I get time back? So it's being patient with yourself and understanding that you're going to constantly be learning and growing and messing up. And fortunately, it gets you better. So I would just tell them to hang in there and continue to lean into the discomfort, they say.
And schedule that formal observation towards the end of the day.
Absolutely. As much as you feel prepared first thing in the morning because you stayed up all night, it does get fine-tuned as the day goes on.
Oh, well, Darren, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time to share your wisdom and experience with us.
I really appreciate the invite, Jacob, and anything you guys need, let me know. And I encourage folks to take a look at the Stride Professional Development Center and all the things that Stride is doing, not only for online education, but education in general.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to The Voice of the Teacher. This is Jacob Montag. Stay tuned because more great things are coming your way. Have a great day.